Adam, do you hear that? Do you hear
Oh,
something? We've let someone behind the wall. There was this paywall, and we let a couple people in, and now they're here listening to us talk about Bob Dylan, Rare and Unreleased, the Bootleg series, Volume 1 through 3. I don't know. In all seriousness, we're here for our first ever episode that is behind a paywall. And so for the, I don't know, 6 or 7 of you when maybe this is dropping, like, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. It's super cool to already have people excited and supporting us even before this episode was even released. So from us to you, thank you. Uh, do you have anything you want to say at the outset, Adam? Any kind words to the friends of the pod?
yeah, no, obviously, like, amazing that anyone wants to pay to listen to us speak. We were just talking about how funny it is that the idea that everything should be free, regardless. And so the fact that anyone wants to give us any amount of money to listen to us fucking rabbit on about Bob Dylan is crazy. So hopefully, with us doing the bootleg series and the live albums, and kind of more of the esoteric down the line. This is like more the esoteric subjects that we used to cover on. I was about to say No Time to Think. What was the name of the fucking podcast?
Nothing is
Nothing's
revealed.
revealed. Nothing's revealed.
That's
It was a
how
different Dylan song.
yeah.
um, so that's we kind of expect that to be for more of the kind of hardcore fans, and so and yeah, anyone who subscribed and is paying us for this, hopefully it's worth your money. We're going to try and make it worth it. And yeah, we're going to look into more of the kind of hardcore albums for you. So yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited. Like you said, we're maybe to just make it abundantly clear for those of you who are here and able to listen. The paid version will include to start here a pretty extended. It's going to take us a long time run through the bootleg series. I mean, initially when Adam and I sat down to do this episode, we were going to cover volumes 1 through 3 at once, and then we realized like shit, this is going to be way too long. No one's going to be able to endure this entire slog. So it's going to get broken into 3 episodes. So we'll do volume 1, volume 2, and then volume 3 before moving on to 4, 5, 6, and then all the way up to volume 18. And then beyond that, we'll talk about some live albums. We'll talk about compilation albums, and even like the bootlegs that aren't official, movies, Dylan appearing in all kinds of media. So you have that to look forward to. But today, as I said, we're talking about the bootleg series, volume 1 through 3, but specifically volume 1, which would be disc 1 if you have a CD or a vinyl copy. And this is a box set if you're unfamiliar, or I guess on streaming, it's just a very long compilation by Bob Dylan that was issued on Columbia Records. It's the very first installment in Dylan's official catalog of the Bootleg series. And this particular release comprises material that spanned the first 3 decades of his career, from 1961 to 1989, or to 1991 when it was released, but there's not actually any music past 1989. The collection itself, Bootleg Volume 1 through 3, contains rarities, unreleased works, primarily from sessions for 1962's debut Bob Dylan, which we talked about last week, all the way through Oh Mercy from 1989, which at that time was his entire recording career, which is kind of crazy to think about, that somebody living in 1991. So let's just like back up for a moment. If you were a man or a woman or a cat or a dog or a fish or whoever's listening, and you were living in 1991, first of all, what was happening? Because I was like -3. I wasn't even alive yet. But Bob Dylan, drops this rare and unreleased collection of material that most people, the general public, had never heard. This was like, unless you were an obsessive who had access to tapes or maybe like unofficial bootleg recordings, you likely hadn't heard any of this. So that's a pretty remarkable feat in and of itself. And of the 58 tracks that are on the whole thing, again, today we're only talking about disc 1, but I'm just giving you sort of the highlights here. Of the 58 total tracks, 45 are session outtakes, again, from Dylan through Oh Mercy. The remaining 13, one is an outtake from a session for the George Jackson single in 1971. 2 are further releases from the Basement tape sessions from 1967. 5 of the songs are live recordings, and 5 are demos, which would go on to appear on studio albums. But as we've said like 13 times at this point, today we're just talking about disc 1. That is songs 1 through 22 if you're on streaming or if you have a cassette, CD, or vinyl or whatever it is. And so, Adam, I'll stop rambling on here. How do we want to jump into this conversation about specifically Volume 1 of the Bootleg series?
So I think what we should be talking about is obviously we're going to talk about songs we like, but I think more importantly, what songs we're surprised were left off of albums. When we get to volume 2 and 3, we'll also be talking more about the alternate takes that maybe we prefer or don't. But on volume 1, there's not any alternate takes. There's 2 demos, but not actually from the studio sessions. So volume 1, I think it's important to say it spans from, as you said, Bob Dylan, 1962, all the way to Time Zero Changing. So as you said, there's the entire thing goes from Bob Dylan to Oh Mercy, but just disc 1 is just the first 3 albums. And actually, if you look at the start of disc 2, it's still just Time Zero Changing. Like just
Yep.
we know how prolific he was in those early days, but this is just so blatant here that he's just churning so many. And then think about how many bootlegs we've had since that have also covered this period, including last year's Through the Open Window. Like how prolific Dylan is in those early days cannot be understated. And so we've got a whole disc here of just those first 3 albums. As well, back to your introduction as well, I think it's important to remember that when this was released in 1991, so we'd had Biograph in 85, so 6 years later this is released. But if you think about where Dylan is in 91, he's just released Under the Red Sky, which to me is his second worst studio album, and to a lot of people, especially following on from Oh Mercy, is insanely disappointing. Dylan is at kind of a career low. This album's put out so Columbia could kind of like fend off the actual bootleggers, and I think everyone realized they could actually make some money out of all of these this bootlegging that other people were doing for free, or these other people were probably making money and actually selling their own kind of records of tapes and stuff that had been handed around. But also, I'm wondering if you were a fan in 91, or maybe if you used to be a fan and you heard this in 91, do you think this would make you think that Bob Dylan had lost his way? It seems odd to put out an album from that, if we just talk about volume 1, obviously they came as 3, but let's just talk about volume 1. Put out an album from 30 years ago that shows just how prolific and how insanely talented you used to be. And then in 1991, that's not Dylan's best. It's almost like trying to kind of recapture some of that glory, I feel like.
Yeah, it could
Obviously,
be.
he then went on to have like what I would consider like the best part of his career. Like I'm obviously, I love Old Man Dylan, and the comeback like is like needs to be studied of how it's like fucking Gandalf the White coming back at the end of Return of the King. But like at the time, people must have heard this and gone, "Oh yeah, I remember Bob Dylan. He used to be fucking amazing. Let's listen to his latest album. What is this shit?" Like,
Yeah.
that's how I imagine I'd have approached it at the time.
No, if I said the words shifting baseline syndrome, do you know like what that is?
Nah.
No, I mean it's a term within climate change, like in the conversation surrounding the climate, but I think it can be used elsewhere
You know
too.
how I feel about that, Jones.
Well, it's this idea that like because we are only ever obviously like here right now, like you and I, Adam, can't go back to 1991 to see what the climate was like, what the weather was like, throughout the seasons as each year went on. Like we're only ever able to like see in real time what's happening, and we forget that as the years and as the decades roll on, that like the baseline sort of shifts. And I think that that's sort of true of Dylan. It's true of just music and music history more broadly. You touched on this, but just to make it abundantly clear for those that may not be aware, the idea or the concept of bootlegging albums by 1991 was like almost ubiquitous. Like everybody was sort of doing it. But back in the late 60s and the early 70s, it was a new phenomenon. And Dylan was sort of the first artist that collectors really went after. I think people recognized that Dylan was prolific. He was somebody that had so much music that was left off of his studio albums, and they were sort of like hungry for more, especially when he had his motorcycle accident and retreated into the woods and disappeared for the better half of like half a decade. Like real Dylan obsessives were like, I would like to get my hands on more music, please. Like, we're already kind of sick of these first few albums. And so, this industry of bootlegging, which is a term that comes back from prohibition with alcohol, way back in the 1920s and 1930s in the United States. So the concept of these people getting their hands on actual tapes somehow, it's interesting to sort of dive into the history, but you have these fans getting their hands on tapes and making illicit copies on vinyl and then distributing them broadly amongst the fan base and the communities. And then you also have people who are distributing actual just tapes, not just the vinyl records. And so this industry, as you said, sort of like snowballed and spiraled until the point where Dylan and his team were like, we could actually basically do this, but make the money ourselves. And so they, like you said, they put out their own version of a bootleg series. And this was, I think Biograph was sort of like testing the waters to see what could be done. But like, unlike Biograph, which, I mean, it did have a couple of unreleased songs, that was more or less like a greatest hits compilation interspersed with some other things. This is the first time that Dylan and his team have put out rare and unreleased material from the last 30 years. That's pretty unheard of, especially at the time.
Well, also you've got to be aware that Bob was very aware of this was happening. Like we've both read Simple Twist of Fate about the recording of Blood on the Tracks, and at the end of each day, apparently Dylan was like, burn the tapes of what we're not going to use because people steal it and sell it on. And that still happens. So yeah, Dylan, I assume was very involved. Like we don't know how involved he is with like Columbia and what's released. Like you have to imagine he has a say, etc. And he's quite a savvy businessman by all accounts. So yeah, I think like you just said, I think he's gone. Well, we could be making all this money, and I do think there's a part of, and we can put out something that's going to be very well received, especially in this career dip, and that people have been asking for.
Well, to your point, like when 30 years on, how else would you release this material if you wanted to put it out? Like Dylan was sort of one of the first artists to start doing this, to sort of retroactively look back down your career and be like, you know what, I have this whole trove, this treasure chest of material, and I don't know how to put it out. Well, let's put it out in this capacity. But I mentioned a little bit ago the idea of a shifting baseline. And the reason that I mentioned that is because I think we take for granted today. I mean, Adam, you before we hit record, you and I were just saying that like if streaming disappeared, it'd be kind of difficult to keep track of Dylan's music. Like we had some records here and some CDs here and some MP3 files here, but nothing sort of like housed all in one place. And so we again we take for granted the fact that we just have unfettered, unlimited access via this like supercomputer in our pocket. But in 1991, that wasn't true. I mean, all most people had at the time would have been like records, maybe cassettes, maybe CDs, maybe some bootleg stuff, and even that was going to be played in your car or on a stereo. You weren't taking it with you, and so when this came out, like people were pretty shocked, people were pretty surprised, and coincidentally I'm convinced you posted it, Adam, like that's how coincidental it was. But there was a Reddit thread this week, and obviously by now, by the time this releases, it'll have been a couple of weeks ago, but like this week as we're recording, somebody asked on Reddit, do you remember which song you were most excited to listen to when the Bootleg series volume 1 through 3 was released back in 1991? I wasn't old enough, basically was like the point of this post. And so like hundreds of comments from people that were alive, that were around, that were excited for it, were weighing in and even recollecting what that moment was like. Because again, living today in 2026, we can look back at volumes 1 through 3 and maybe not really recognize or realize how significant this release was, or how excited Dylan obsessives were. Like I'm trying to think of an equivalent. Maybe an equivalent for you and me today, Adam, is if like Dylan and his crew released the shelved albums that we think are out there. So I'm thinking like the 1970-ish era one, or the one with like Clyde E. King. Like if Dylan suddenly just like dropped those tomorrow, we would be freaking the fuck out. And I think in a similar way, in 1991, if you're just a person living back then and suddenly Dylan drops this gargantuan collection of like nearly 60 songs that you've really never heard, it's pretty shocking. I mean, we had, and I wrote down some of the answers people gave, like Foot of Pride, obviously Blind Willie finally getting an official release. Last Thoughts on Woody Guthrie, which isn't a song, but you know what I mean. No More Auction Block, Farewell Angelina, Moonshiner. I mean, basically every song was set on this list, but some appeared more than others. And I think just, oh man, to have been able to live through it, I'm sort of envious of those of you who did.
Well, I think as well, like a lot of these songs were kind of known about or like whispered about. Like there were interviews where people asked Dylan, like, why didn't you release Blind Willie McTell? So even though it hadn't been officially released, people did know about it. Like while she was talking, then it suddenly just occurred to me that it's crazy that there was a time when you couldn't listen to the Judas concert from Free Trade Hall. Like you just said, like we are incredibly lucky to have had access to that our entire kind of Dylan fandom. And yet there was a period before you could go back. It was like the fact that there was no official Rolling Thunder release is fucking mind blowing until was it 2002, I think,
Yeah,
for
whatever it
the
was. Yeah.
Volume 5. But to get back to Volume 1, should we pick some songs to talk about? I
Yeah,
reckon.
I just had one more quick comment on the back of what
Oh,
you
go on.
said. And the thing that I want to just call out is like how appreciative we ought to be to the Dylanologists from that era. I mean, from the ones who were aware of the little like suspicions of, have you heard of this song? Did you hear about Blind Willie? Like, do you have your hands on this tape? Like the Dylanologists and the bootleggers back then are the ones who loved Dylan, obsessed over him, wanted all of his music. And if you think about it, are responsible for Dylan and Jeff Rosen and his team even releasing this. So it's like I'm grateful that there were people that like cared enough to ask those questions, to probe, and to ultimately get these things to see the light of day. But yeah, let's talk about the songs. Where do you want to start?
I think we should start. We mentioned this on last week's episode for Bob Dylan, but he was a friend of mine and Man on the Street. I said this last week. I'm just going to reiterate it. I think these two should have been on the album. I think they're
Hmm.
better than a couple of songs that were on the album. Particularly, he was a friend of mine. I know there's an amazing version by Dave Van Ronk at Phil Oakes' funeral, which everyone should check out. But I think Dylan's version here is one of those songs. Again, we said this so much last week, but where he sounds like he should be in his 70s, singing about all the people he's known who's died, and instead he's just over 20 and a half years old. And yeah, just like I said, it would have fit it perfectly on the first album. And also, kind of off the back of that, I'll say the No More Auction Block, which is a live recording from the Gaslight, super underrated. Like when I was listening to it again this week, I was like, "Oh, this is." Like, it sounds like a studio recording because you could hear a pin drop
Yep.
in the cafe. And I know the cafe wasn't exactly. They weren't like rowdy in there anyway. People did used to imagine that, gents. People used to go and actually listen to the music as opposed to like just talk or like take fucking phone calls or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but again, we had this discussion last week of how much Dylan kind of took from other artists and other cultures, and singing about an auction block obviously is steeped in kind of kind of deep South slavery, um, but Dylan again makes it his own, and it's just another example of this young artist who was apparently a shapeshifter.
Yeah. I'm trying to imagine in 1991 to be an obsessive, what it was like to put this in your CD player, to put it on your turntable or on your tape deck, however you listen to it, with like that anticipation, like that giddiness of like looking at the list of songs and seeing like, shit, I've heard about this one. Oh, I haven't heard about this one. And just in real time. Like I tried to have that headspace. I literally played it on this turntable behind me here, Adam, this morning, while I was doing some work, just trying to imagine what that was like. And oh, it must have been surreal.
The only time I've had that, like genuinely, was when the Bootleg series 15 was released, the
Yeah.
Johnny Cash one, traveling through, because of how much, obviously, how much I love John Wesley Harding, and to actually hear John Wesley Harding alternate takes, and to hear there's a song on there called Western Road, which is an outtake from Nashville Sky that had never been released, and that's the closest because every time something else has come out, I've been excited, but like I don't know, just nothing's been like. Oh, holy, like it's like imagine if tomorrow they announced a bootleg series of outtakes from John Wesley Hard, like outtake songs that we've never
Yeah.
heard.
Yeah.
I would fucking,
Lose my
my
mind.
head would explode. Like, and so yeah, I know what you mean. Like the idea of actually finally getting to hear something like Blind Willie McTell, or even some of these ones that like you wouldn't know the name. If you looked at a list, you wouldn't necessarily know them, and then you listen to them the first time and go like, "Holy fuck! Like, why
Yeah.
has he left this off?"
Oh, I can't imagine. Um, I don't know. I guess another comment though that I have here, specifically on Talkin' Bear Mountain Picnic Massacre Blues, which is a mouthful to say. This is this. I'm curious. I know. Last week you said you don't like the Talkin' songs. Some of the Talkin' songs I do like, but this time around, I started to maybe feel some of what you feel. Like as I'm listening to it, I'm like, this doesn't work for me. And so I don't exactly know what that means, but I tried to think about it a little bit. And I think part of the problem is this kind of song is better in a real life live context, perhaps, because it's a little bit like tongue in cheek. Maybe some of it is like you actually have to understand the story because there actually was a story. This was like basically just ripped from a newspaper as he read it. And so for most of us living, 50, 60 years removed, we have no idea what happened at Bear Mountain Picnic Massacre or whatever. And so like we lose the context, we lose some of the humor because we're just listening to him record it in the studio versus him being a cheeky little bitch up on stage or something. And so for me, I think the talking songs are probably more effective live. And I want to make a quick comparison. And it's funny that you talked about Cameron Winter last week because I'm going to talk about Cameron Winter right now for just a moment. I had found on Reddit over a Christmas break somebody uploaded a bootleg MP3 of the live at Carnegie Hall that Mr. Winter did a few weeks ago, or maybe a few months ago at this point, and I was blown away. Granted, it was a fan recording. You can hear some chatter and muffles and other shit, but like Cameron live sounds otherworldly, like in a way that like even as I listened to it in my headphones, I couldn't quite grasp or appreciate. Like to actually be there and to hear those moments of him sort of like tinkering with the keys a little bit and you start like hearing people laugh or whatever. But the point that I'm trying to get to is I think some artists, some musicians, they can be captured or like parts of their essence can be captured in the studio, but I think people like Cameron Winter, Adrian Lenker, Bob Dylan, the people that we talk about sort of in these contexts, they have this special quality above and beyond that you almost have to experience live. Like even hearing a live recording doesn't do justice to what it's like to experience them in person. And so I think the comparison that I'm trying to draw is that the all the songs that are talking, talking World War III blues, talking John Birch Society blues, whatever. I think those songs are probably just better if you were to go see Bob live at a cafe in 1961. Like it doesn't really do anything for me today in 2026, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but they're more like they feel like stand-up routines, which is why I've never massively liked them. And I think, like you said, they're instantly aged because, yeah. So Bear Mountain Picnic, there was a real thing that happened there. Dylan then records that on April the 25th, 1962, and the album Freewheelin' wasn't then released until 1963. So by the time it already comes out, it's already a year old, a year out of the headlines. Like I can see why Dylan didn't include it on the album because it would have just been aged instantly. And I think you're right. When you hear stuff like I think is on Volume 6, the Philharmonic Halloween concert, when Dylan changes a line and he says he name drops Donovan and gets like a massive round of applause because he changes the song. I get that. I think that you're sitting there and Dylan's being cheeky and funny. I get that. I think that would be funny. But listening to an album, it's almost like when rap albums used to have skits on them,
Yeah.
and I just it's awful. Like, why just get to the fucking music, man?
I'm thinking of like De
um,
La Soul. They got tons of skits.
yeah, it's just like sometimes they are funny. Like, don't get me wrong, but other times it's just like this is taking up a valuable place where a track could be.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about freewheeling next week as part of the normal podcast. But like, just look at all the freewheeling
Oh, it's
outtakes
absurd. I
on
know.
here. Like, and this
Are
is
there
I don't
9?
want to kind of um something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a fucking ton. But like, I don't want to jump the gun on what we're going to talk about freewheeling, but I know me and you both have issues with the track listing on freewheeling and what was chosen for the album, and what wasn't chosen. And when you look at stuff like Let Me Die in My Footsteps, which I know you're a massive fan of, House Carpenter, which is traditional, and Dylan wanted freewheeling to be more self-written, but there are still some traditional songs on freewheeling. House Carpenter, I think, especially this performance, blows everything out of the water.
Yeah.
You've got kind of more of the silly songs like, Talking, Having a Gila Blues and stuff where
I
like
can't
that's not
stand
a
that
song, is
song
it? It's not a
either.
real
Yeah.
it's just not a real song, is it?
It's just goofy.
Um, but like The Walls of Red Wing as well, I think's really underrated as well. Like there's there's so much stuff here, and then he chooses something like Honey, Just Allow Me One More Chance. And it's like, come on, man, like how did that get into how was that even in the conversation at the end?
And it's funny. We again to not give too much away. When you look at the dates of when some of these were recorded, like House Carpenter was recorded right as Bob Dylan was being released. So like his first album is coming out to record stores, and he's already back in the studio laying down. I mean, in that case, a traditional song, but like in April, in July of '62, and November, like the thing that we forget is Dylan, like Freewheelin', had a very, very, very long recording session, especially compared to his first album. I mean, his first album was 2 3-hour sessions. His next album is like almost 2 years of recording sessions. And I think when you consider that his first album was primarily traditional songs, and you see this list, there's like 3 or 4 traditionals. I mean, you have House Carpenter, you have Worried Blues, Kingsport Town, like I think Dylan recognized and realized, like, shoot, this second album, I don't think I can fill with traditional. Like, I need to find original material to release. And I think what inevitably happened, I think, is he gave too much time. Had he not waited as long as he did, and had he released what he had, the version that we talked about, the record store day release that had come out, it's like the original intended version of the album. If he had released that and not waited and gone back to the studio, it is like it is interesting to think about and consider how different his career trajectory would have been. But I think these get the chopping block. They get sent to the cutting room floor. I think maybe out of insecurity, maybe out of a little bit of like doubt or like I don't know. What do you have a thought? Do you have an idea?
Or again, I don't want to continually kind of give away what we're going to talk about on Freewheeling.
Yeah, yeah.
I believe it was meant to be two albums, one called
Mm,
Bob Dylan's Blues and one called Freewheeling Bob Dylan. Or at least it changed halfway through, and so I think there was enough material for two, and it became one. Is what I've read, I believe. We'll probably look into that more next week.
yeah.
So I understand there's so much stuff there, and the album can't be infinitely long. And yeah, by the time a year later Dylan looks back and listens to what he'd recorded at the start, I understand him kind of going like, I don't want to do that song anymore. But it is a shame. I mean, obviously we've got it now, so it's not a shame now. But that people were deprived for nearly 30 years of something like House Carpenter is crazy. And then obviously you go back and record House Carpenter again for Self Portrait, which we'll get to eventually in another amazing version. All right, if we move on then, we'll just leave the Times Are Changing outtakes for a minute because we've got two live at Carnegie Hall songs, neither of which appear on a studio album, which is Talking John Birch Paranoid Blues, which we've already spoke about, but also Who Killed Davy Moore as well. And obviously this is a period of protest, Bob, but Who Killed Davy Moore is one of the most overt protest songs he did, isn't it? Even like obviously
Yeah.
you've got Hattie Carroll and you've got even stuff like Oxford Town or Freewheeling, but this is so overtly Bob Dylan, the protest singer. And at the time, it wasn't long after that he started saying, "I'm not a protest singer," and it's like, mate, fucking come
You
on,
you
stuff
were
like.
though.
But I think "Who Killed Davy Moore" like still hits, still
Yeah.
like a really good song. Um, Talking John Birch Paranoid Blues, I think is better than Bear Mountain Massacre because kind of this fear of communism still obviously around and stuff like that, and then there's still like parallels to today. But Davy Moore in particular is like just one of those timeless songs. If it appeared on an album, I think it. I'm not sure. Like to your point, I'm not sure it'd work as well on the album. It seems kind of more of a live experience, but yeah, it still rings true today.
Well,
Sadly,
and yeah, sad, very sad, and yeah, it has a certain power when you're sitting in an auditorium, and especially when you don't know the song. Like it's different if you know a whole album and you come in and expect to hear those songs, but if you're going to hear Dylan sing at a concert hall and he pulls out this tune that you've never heard, like you're probably at the edge of your seat listening intently the whole time, and that's why it was so quiet. Everyone was just locked in, their gaze fixed on Dylan, and especially the last line of "Who Killed Davy Moore." It says, "Don't say murder, don't say kill. It was destiny, it was God's will." Still relevant today. I mean, I'm thinking of even stuff that happened in the news days ago. People who are dying in this country. Yeah, very relevant. And to just briefly make mention to your point of John talking John Birch blues, the intro, he's talking about like I forget exactly what he says. Like this isn't a bad song. Do you remember the exactly what he says at the beginning? He's like talking to the audience.
Yeah, yeah, no, I can't remember word
He
for word,
he
but yeah, he
says
talks about how it's yeah.
well, and if do you know what he's mentioning? He's hearkening back to something we talked about on Nothing Is Revealed.
Go on. Oh, Ed
Uh,
Sullivan.
yeah, so the
Yeah.
context is on May 12th, 1963, Dylan was supposed to be playing the Ed Sullivan Show, and he was supposed to play this song, but he was basically censored. He decides to walk off the set and not play his television, big television break debut. So that again, that was May of '63, and he plays this song at Carnegie Hall on October 26th, 1963. So about like, 5, 6 months later or whatever. And it's just funny to have that little nugget of like Dylan must have recognized that people in the audience would understand, because otherwise that wouldn't have made sense as an introduction to that song.
And it's also crazy not to hark back to Cameron Winter again. This is basically a Bob Dylan slash Cameron Winter podcast. But to play at Carnegie Hall at that age and to play songs that weren't on an album, which is exactly what Cameron did the other day, but Dylan was doing as well. Like, he's getting on stage and singing a song that almost got him banned from TV essentially, and a song about a boxer that hasn't been released. That just seems to me that's just we spoke about this last week of like, is it bravery? Is it arrogance? Is it confidence? But to your point earlier, that's probably part of the excitement of going and seeing someone like them, which is as much as you want to hear them sing "Blowing in the Wind," you probably also want to hear something different. And it must be weird for people who went to that Carnegie Hall recording, well, the concert, and then they probably thought for like 30 or nearly 30 years, like, oh, what was that song he played? Like I never heard it again. And then in 1991, you get the chance to hear it again. That must be quite a special moment for some people if
Yeah,
they were
for
there.
real.
Okay, so let's move on to the times they were changing outtakes. Like I said, some of these do then run on to disc two, which we'll talk about on the next bonus episode. But the times are changing outtakes we have here are, I think, well, so we've only got three on this disc, but I think they are all absolute fucking bangers. You got Paths to Victory, which sounds like a kind of like a Woody Guthrie song, I think.
Hmm.
Like the piano moves along nicely. It's a relatively simple song and it's very overtly kind of times that are changing, like we need to do something and we're gonna win victory in this culture war. You've got Only a Hobo, which again is quite political in the terms of like attitudes towards homeless people, obviously. But then you've got, oh baby, I'm gonna say this is the best song on this disc. I think
It's up
it's a
there.
traditional song, but oh man, if anyone ever says Bob Dylan can't sing, play Moonshiner for them because it is one of the most haunting songs I think I've ever heard.
It's
It's this
insane.
thing of him embodying someone much older than him again, but he's like, whilst I said that about he was a friend of mine, on this recording, Dylan's what 2 years older, a bit more mature, I think, in his singing style and his playing. And I don't know, this is like one of the best songs of all time, I'm gonna say. It's an unbelievable song.
Is there not an irony though in a song about moonshine? I mean, how closely is the idea of moonshining related to bootlegging?
Yeah,
And
true.
like there, but it's all, dude, I just realized though, like in real time as I'm looking at this, Paths of Victory, Only a Hobo, and Moonshiner all recorded on the same day, right? August 12th, 1963. Um, what a like it's so interesting when you actually can see the date stamps of when things were recorded and consider like I don't know how prolific that this little kid was. I mean, these I say kid, I mean he was in his early 20s, but you consider the fact that these three songs, which for all intents and purposes were left on the cutting room floor for decades, were recorded the same day. And Dylan was like, yeah, those are all right. Not quite as good as, North Country Blues. Nothing against North Country Blues, but I would have taken Moonshiner over North Country Blues any day.
I'm a massive North Country Blues defender. We've had this conversation before, but I will agree that I would have preferred, but I'd preferred Moonshine to almost every song. I think Times Are Change is like a 10 out of 10, top 10 album for me. But uh, this is the thing, we'll continually return to this point, which is Bob Dylan is his worst editor, his own worst editor. Because, there are obvious examples like Blind Willie or like Abandoned Love or Pretty Sour or something like that. But then you hear a song like Moonshine, and again, I get Times Are Changing is the first totally self-penned album. And so I do get him not wanting to choose a traditional song. But even he must have listened to his performance on that song and gone, I fucking nailed that. Let's hide that in a vault for 28 years. Like, if I did anything like that, I'd go and hand that out on the street myself to people, going like, listen to this.
I would have been like, okay, we're not going to do the traditional, but can I come up with something that sounds kind of like Moonshiner, but it's my own, you know what I mean?
Or play it live. Like it's so weird that he does this and then just goes like, all right, yeah, let's just forget about that one then and continue and it's just mind blowing. But I'm so grateful that we have this because it is like I know it's kind of sounds like over the top, but I genuinely do think Moonshine is like one of my favorite ever songs, and certainly from a vocal standpoint, I think is
Yeah.
like I said, is just proof that Bob Dylan. I mean, obviously Bob Dylan can sing. We all know people who say that are fucking idiots, but this is just like concrete proof that his voice, when when used right, is an incredibly powerful tool and powerful instrument in his kind of arsenal. And here it's just like heartbreakingly sad
What's
and
funny
just yeah, insanely good.
What's funny that of the song, like of a short list of songs that I would give to somebody who says that Bob Dylan can't sing, two of them weren't even included on their respective albums. I mean, like you said, Pretty Sorrow and Moonshiner. Like
I'll
his
tell you what,
vocal is peak on both of them.
I'd probably also throw in a band of Love and Blind Willie McTell, actually. Maybe he does his best singing on outtakes.
Maybe that's the point. He's like he wants to lean into the myth that he can't sing, but to maybe move on real quick to another quirk or another oddity of this disc, the final song, if you will, Last Thoughts on Woody Guthrie. This is so odd. And the fun fact that I have here is that Last Thoughts on Woody Guthrie, which was played at the Town Hall in New York, marked the first and last, thus only time that he ever read his own verse in a concert. Like, can you again imagine for a moment? You've just gone to a Bob Dylan concert, expecting to hear him play some silly songs, some protest songs, maybe something in between, but you probably weren't expecting him to bust out a fucking poem that was supposed to go. Wasn't it like I was supposed to write like 25 words or whatever, and he wrote basically a short novel, and it's so fucking incredible. And what's crazy is somehow this poem or this song, whatever you want to call it, has been baked into my psyche so much that when I write poetry, I sometimes find myself writing it in this cadence, if that makes sense. Like I have a hard time like deviating from the rhythm of this poem. But man, what are your thoughts on the last thoughts of Woody Guthrie?
I mean, it goes without saying, it's an incredible bit of Bob Dylan hated people calling him a poet, and then he does like one of the best poems I've heard. Um, my mother-in-law, who saw Dylan in '79 and '81, but when A Complete Unknown come out and when she knew that we were calling our son Dylan, she really got back into Bob Dylan. And she said about this, she said, "Oh, I heard this one the other day called Last Thoughts on Woody Guthrie." And she said she just sat there and just she stopped. I think she was doing housework or something, and she sat and it like stopped her in a track and she just listened to it and she's not someone who this is meant in no way offense to her, but she's not someone who likes poetry, who would go out of her way to listen to poetry. And then this, I don't know what it is. It's just so weirdly raw and just it hits you. I remember when I first heard it, and I was just like, "What the fuck is it?" Because also, if you look at the date it was recorded, so Town Hall was April 12th, 1963. So that's before all of the tracks that precede it. If you go back to, so this technically in a chronological order should be track 13, but they've purposely put it at the end of disc 1 because I think if that was in the middle of the track list, you wouldn't be thinking about anything else after you heard that. Like, because it's so, like you said, it's an oddity, but it just stops you in your tracks. I feel like, and it just shows how. Did you see the other week when Dylan wrote a a thing about Willie Nelson? It kind of reminds me of that. Of like, Dylan seems to be just a master of summing up the experience of hearing someone else. Um, and I don't know, just the way he speaks about Woody. I already love Woody Guthrie, um, but you know, he kind of fell off the Woody train when he went electric. You know, he stopped saying that Woody was his idol as much, and later on in life, he came back round to kind of admitting that. But I think there was a period where he was a bit too cool for Woody anymore. You know, the fictionalized complete unknown scene where he ruffles his hair and drives off on his motorbike. Um, but you know, this does show just how much Woody meant to him and to kind of music. But also is just Dylan at his best. He's not. He doesn't feel like he's showing off his vocabulary and showing off how he writes this. In fact, actually, I think that's why it hits so hard. It almost seems weirdly earnest
Hmm.
from Bob Dylan, a man who hides behind character or innuendo or you know whatever, like lying to the press or have you. But this seems to be Dylan actually one of the few times, especially in that part of his career, being almost like being Robert Zimmerman and just being like, this is what this man meant to me. And it's just it's powerful and it's a highlight of Dylan's kind of like life career for me, I'd say.
Well, I say what I'm going to say in response. Can you look up when Woody Guthrie died? Like, I'm curious how long.
60, 60, end of 67, wasn't it? Because the tribute concert was early 68.
Okay, so he was still alive at this point. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Okay, okay. I was gonna say because like, where was his headspace? And so, I mean, that fact alone, the fact that Woody was still living, and these were his last thoughts on Woody Guthrie. That's a an irony I think I hadn't really explored before. Um, but there's so much here. It's obviously not just about Woody Guthrie. It's more about like the spirit of Woody Guthrie, what Woody Guthrie stood for, the the tradition that follows after him, whether it be folk or rock and roll or blues or whatever, and how that relates to society at large. I mean, there's conversations about like marketing tactics employs and social issues and everything in between. And I mean, his point is that like this person, this bastion of this machine kills fascists and all kinds of stuff that's ever relevant and present and pertinent today. He's underscoring and highlighting just how much this singular person, this one person can touch so much of the world and society and what that has meant to Dylan specifically. And oh man, it's just like unparalleled. Like I'm so glad that there's recorded evidence of this.
I've just been looking at the town hall, and this is just an interesting fact for you, Jens. So not only did he come back out at the end to recite Last Thoughts of Woody Guthrie, so he'd finished the concert and then came back out and actually I want to do this poem, which insane way to end a conference, a concert. But it was also used to debut "Tomorrow Is a Long Time." So you've sat there and you've heard "Tomorrow Is a Long Time" and gone, "Oh, this kid's a genius. He might be the best writer of all time," and then he fucking comes out and does Last Thoughts of Woody Guthrie. That would be like, I know people, want to go back and see the 1966 concerts, but Jesus Christ, that must have been insane to see.
Is that the version of Tomorrow Was a Long Time that eventually comes out on the Greatest Hits Volume 2?
Yeah, 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 Town Hall,
Oh,
yeah.
damn. So like, yeah, contextually, that is to have been at that show. Have we ever heard? I mean, maybe that's like the great thing that we want to hear. Like, is there a full version of this show that could be available from start to finish?
Yeah, that was just released on the full version of Through the Open Window. The
Okay,
full Town
okay,
Hall show is, I think. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, we've got it. We have it.
okay. See, I this is okay. To be clear, this is actually a really good point to illustrate that I think we'll get to this way, way, way into the future because it's so far away from right here, right now. But I'm getting kind of like burnt out on the
Oh no,
bootleg
sorry, no,
series.
live. Carnegie Hall's released on the on Through the Open Window, but
Oh,
I have
okay.
the Town Hall. I can send it to you. I've got it on
Okay.
iTunes.
Okay, cool. But like I think my point is still true here in that like I feel a little bit burnt out on the basement or sorry, the bootleg series now. Like we've had so many iterations and a lot of it is derivative. Like a lot of it's stuff that we've either had before in other places, but now it's being compiled, under one roof. Or they do this annoying thing like with the most recent one where there's like the super deluxe version that's like 18 discs or whatever, but then on streaming all you get is like the highlights and I don't know, there's just something off-putting about like obviously it's like a marketing tactic or whatever and most people aren't going to listen to all 18 discs like they recognize that only the obsessives will and so they're just going to give like the tiny little sampler to the casual fan but um I don't know what connection I was trying to make there but go ahead.
No, I'm with you on the bootleg series. Like, I think something has happened, and we'll discuss as we go through. So, like, volume 1 to 3 is the entirety of the bootleg series. There's nothing else. Same with 4, 5, 6, 7. Then by the time 8 comes around, which is my favorite bootleg series, you get the standard edition, the deluxe edition, the super deluxe edition, the collector's edition, and that's all well and good to a certain extent. Like as we were saying at the top of the episode, I've got no issue buying media. I'm not saying it all needs to be on streaming. What I have an issue with is by the time Volume 16 comes around to Springtime in New York, the 80s stuff, which I'm a defender of the 80s, but I'm not like that crazy about it. You need to get the super special secret version that has an extra take of fucking License to Kill Off Infidels or something like that. And it's like that to me does seem like a bit of like kind of just gouging money off
Yeah,
people.
cash
Do you know
grab.
what I mean? Like and like Through the Open Window, to be fair, isn't as bad. And I believe I don't want to get you in any trouble, Jens, but you sent me an illegal version of it. But like fragments for some reason was uploaded in its entirety on stream. Like I don't know what the rules are of what gets uploaded in its entirety and what doesn't. And the sampler for More Blood, More Tracks is fine, like you said, for people who kind of want to hear the alternate takes of the album tracks, and then an obsessive like me does want the full thing. But when there are like these 12 disc editions that are like $250, and on it you get an extra version of Simple Twist of Fate that no one else has heard, it's like unless he says something entirely different. If it's just that it's a slightly different tempo, then it does feel like Columbia and by extension Dylan are taking the piss. Especially when you look at Volume 4 is literally the Free Trade Hall concert, and that is it.
I know.
And like it does seem to have gone a bit down. I get, things become more commercial, more corporate. Now that albums don't make as much money, you need to start charging more for kind of special editions and stuff like that. I get that. And also with you, I'm with you in the sense of being a little bit burnt out because once I heard that the latest bootleg series was again going to be covering early folk, I was a bit like, ah, fucking hell. Like, I get that they're probably jumping a bit on the complete unknown. I mean, I think they missed the boat, but they were kind of like on the kind of coattails of that. But I know how much stuff there is that's unreleased from the 80s and the 90s. And especially like we've had Springtime in New York so up to Empire Burlesque, but I put together a compilation for you of 85 to like 90 of how many amazing tracks are there that could really that make you take a different look at Knocked Out Loaded and Down in a
Yeah.
Groove, and how much stuff there was done the Bromberg sessions in early 92, which are just fucking some of my favorite ever Dylan recordings. And then when you've got to bring it back to volume 1, when you've got something this succinct of like these are some amazing tracks, when you get to volume 18 and they're like, oh, we found another outtake, it's like, right, but you haven't released them on any of the ones before, so is it that good, or or are you thinking there's another way you could make some money out of this?
And that's, I mean, a song here, for example, that we haven't even talked about, "Worried Blues." That's one of my favorites from this session. I'll at the end here, I'll list my highlights, like my favorites from disc one here. But like "Worried Blues," for example, the version that's on volume one and the version that's on volume 18, they're ever so slightly different, but they might as well be the same. But that's to your point. It just feels like this yes, we maybe some Dylan obsessives want every piece of everything that's ever been recorded, but I don't know. Again, at some point you just sort of start to lose steam. But I think something that we haven't even really made mention of just yet, and I think as we start to wind down and close, we should comment on We alluded to the fact at the beginning that Dylan was sort of the first major recording artist to be heavily bootlegged. Others like it are like Jimi Hendrix, The Who, Led Zeppelin is insanely bootlegged. The Rolling Stones, for example.
Oh,
But
Grateful Dead and Tom Waits as well. They have
mm,
like a huge amount behind them. Yeah.
yeah, but this idea of officially releasing a bootleg series, like Dylan was also sort of one of the first artists to start doing this more officially, and then artists started to take note and follow suit. So that's where you have around this same exact time, bands like the Beatles doing anthology. They do anthology 1, 2, and 3, and then obviously we just had anthology 4 this last year. You get like Miles Davis and even some of the bands I just made mention of start releasing some of their demos and alternate takes and rare and unreleased stuff as well. And so I don't think the general public necessarily knows that, but the amount of credit that is owed to Dylan, not just as a great songwriter, not just as a great performer, not as somebody who's had an illustrious career, but even as somebody who like moves the market to do new and different things. It I don't know. I think it sort of flies under the radar a little bit that again, Dylan is sort of the first artist to ever be heavily bootlegged unofficially and officially. And so I want to recognize that here and something that obviously those of you who are listening right now to this are paid subscribers. If you haven't yet, please go look at like the email we sent you or go to our Substack and look at the post for this episode because I'm going to include in the notes a link to the original Rolling Stone article that promoted the release of this particular bootleg series volume 1 through 3 because it's fascinating to read Rolling Stone write about this contextually in its time and place. But I just wanted to say that in his liner notes, to talk about liner notes because we have to, John Baldy, who considers himself to be a Dylanologist as well, he promises that future volumes of the bootleg series will feature classic concert material. So again, contextually in 1991, you might think like, is this it? Like he's labeled this 1 through 3. Well, how many versions are there going to be, and how soon, and what is it going to be? Well, he's already sort of starting to give you a taste in the liner notes, saying that future will have classic concert material, including 1966 performance with the Hawks at London's Royal Albert Hall. And it says, certainly the consistent brilliance and revelatory quality of the music on volumes 1 through 3 ensures that, as Baldy puts it, whatever reputation Bob Dylan has enjoyed as a writer and performer in his 30-year recording career will inevitably have to be reviewed in the light of this historic collection.
Two things. One, John Baldy wrote a book called The Chameleon Poet about Dylan, which is amazing. Two, why we haven't even mentioned this. Why do you think he called this volume 1 to 3? Why is this just not volume 1? It's very strange to open with like that's really jumping the gun. Now that they're on 18, if this was just
Yeah,
volume 1, they'd only be on 16 now. Like, did he not think he had that much in the tank, or like it just seems really strange to because then obviously the Free Trade Hall concert is just volume 4.
that
So
yeah, that's a good point. It feels like a very Dylan thing. I mean, like Rainy Day Women numbers 12 and 35 or whatever. Like it almost feels like that sort of vibe of like, wouldn't it be funny if we did it this way? Or maybe it was because he had been, recording for 30 years at this point, and like each disc
mm,
is sort of like, I know it's not quite another decade, but kind of. So maybe he was sort of trying to fudge around a little bit there, but I don't have a good answer. Maybe one of our Dylanologist paid subscribers knows and will tell us in the comments.
well, to quote AJ Mepperman, we're not Dylanologists, we're just fans, so we certainly would know. Um, all right, do you want to give me some of your highlights? I'll give you some of my highlights. I think we're going to basically, this is going to be a circle of us, of our Venn diagram of favorite songs because
Yeah,
we have the
I
same.
agreed. And I do want to say though that like this collection, the first 20 some songs here, a lot of them aren't necessarily the best songs I've ever heard. Like some of the demos, they're just demos. I mean, we know what Times They Are Changing sounds like. We know what, when the ship comes in sounds like or whatever. Um, but I think the precedent that they set, like what Dylan is doing here is unrivaled, unparalleled. So my specific highlights though, songs that I think are worth listening to, like if you just want to add them to a playlist or something, we have House Carpenter, Let Me Die in My Footsteps, Worried Blues, Kingsport Town. His guitar playing on Kingsport Town is fucking incredible. It should have been on the album. Paths of Victory, Only a Hobo, Moonshiner, and Last Thoughts on Woody Guthrie. If that was an album in and of itself, that would be one of the greatest albums to ever exist. Period.
Um, I will I will agree with all of them. I will throw in He Was a Friend of Mine as well, from the first album. And yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with any of the ones. I think Who Killed Davy Moore as well is a very good live performance. And oh wait, no, actually, sorry, No More Auction Block as well, which I said at the start. I think again from a live album, a live performance point of view, just kind of a stunning rendition. You feel like you're in the room with him, which is amazing. Um, cool. So that's volume one.
Man.
We- Uh, volume two, probably a lot quicker because we don't need to talk about the history of bootlegging.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it'll still be good. There's a lot of good stuff on volumes
Oh
two
yeah,
and three.
volume two, especially, I think might be my favorite one. Without giving too much away, and there's that we can talk probably about every single song on there quite a
Yeah.
lot.
Yes. Man, well, what final thoughts? Anything that comes to mind? Anything we haven't said, or just we want to kick it out of here?
Again, thanks for paying to listen to us talk about bootlegged songs. Hopefully you've kind of heard about a song maybe you weren't too familiar with, or I mean, if I can say anything, it's just go listen to Moonshiner. Even if you know Moonshiner, just go listen to it again because I would just never get sick of that song, and that makes Volume One. I mean, obviously it's worth it regardless, but that song alone is like makes the entire set worth it for me. It's but yeah, I'm just again so thankful we have this. So thankful we have you listening. Thankful for you, Jens. Thankful to everyone, and yeah, cheers. We'll see you next time, I
I mean,
suppose.
before you kick us out, I was just going to say we have to have in the comments section, let us know what your favorite songs from Volume 1 are, and we want to see them. So until next time, when we talk about freewheeling, be groovy or leave. I was going to say,
Oh,
go listen to something old. And my point was going to be like, it's funny that, again, in 1991, there was probably like hundreds or thousands of people who were just like super excited to go to their local record store or wherever they were buying music to go listen to music that was essentially 30 years old at that point.